Mom's wrangling, so we'll see how this goes.
Right. My dogs are badly behaved.
I welcome it.
All right, here we go. Hey, everybody, this is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale, Arizona, and we are delighted to have Francesca Serritella with us this evening. She's going to be talking about her brand new book, Full Bloom, and we have autographed copies coming. They're on the way, and I'll put a link in the comments field if you'd like to reserve one of those. And, as always, if you have questions for Francesca, go ahead and type them in, and Barbara will bring me on screen in just a little bit, and I'd be happy to ask any of your questions. So, Barbara, over to you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. So I really love this cover and notice the roses. Roses are pretty central to the perfume industry, at least in Provence. So, Francesca, I was thinking before I read your book that a long time ago, John Sanford, who is one of the best authors around, told me that the most important thing, I was a baby editor then, and he was giving me some tips. The most important thing for really getting readers set into a book and setting a scene is the sense of smell. That,
Really?
yep. He said of the five senses, that's the most important. And in every book, he works to put some kind of scent, smell into the early pages. And I had a discussion the other night with an Appalachian author, and we were talking about the smell of the Smoky Mountains and what.
Hmm.
And when Daniel Silva was here, he has scenes. I don't know if you read his books in Corsica. And one of the things he always talks about is the matcha, the um, the combination of the shrubs and the flowers and everything. And Corsica has its own perfume. And
Really?
and it's true because I went there in May that we had that discussion because I it was the perfect month for it. But it's so powerful that Corsicans miss it, when they're not there, the
Yes.
smell of home. So I think, by writing a book in which smell is perfume is central to the story that you want to tell about this young woman and her life, that you actually hit upon a really big thing.
It's true. I really, I never thought about that before I thought about this perfume book, but it's true that I think scent is just so connected to storytelling. It is such a transportive sense, you know what I mean? And there's real science behind what you're saying as far as it being the most evocative sense. It's scent, the sense of scent is processed in our limbic system. It's the oldest, most primal part of our brain. It's in the base and center of our skull. And it only does three things. It processes memory, emotion, and scent. And so that's why, it just completely bypasses logic and language and visual and all that prefrontal cortex. And it goes right to the most visceral, emotional memories. And I think that's just why it's so powerful and how it can work as sort of an external catalyst for internal change for this protagonist.
Oh, that's very well said. Right. Well, I know, aromatherapy is a big thing. Lavender is something, that conducive to sleep, soothing people. I mean,
Right.
I actually have a lavender spray, and sometimes, I remember to spray it on the pillow, and all of that is supposed to, you know, um, to give you better sleep, better, calming, that kind of thing. We think about cooking and we think of the smells out of the kitchen. Gingerbread spells Christmas,
Right. So much of taste is actually smell. It's very actually a little hard for humans to distinguish them. And so, sometimes when people, for whatever reason, lose their sense of smell, whether it be from an injury or we know some people had that symptom from COVID, it can just ruin how food tastes. And it can be one of the most depressing and disorienting symptoms of all is the loss of smell. It really affects you on an emotional level that you don't realize until it's gone.
I'm sure that's true. I mean, in many senses, it's a positive, but then, if you read crime fiction, you know how difficult it is to step into the morgue, for example, where,
Right.
those, so smell can be really off-putting and really harmful in addition to being, soothing and exciting and stimulating and all the
But
rest.
you know what's so interesting about the example of the morgue? I learned one of the more interesting fun facts that I learned that I didn't know when I was researching this book is that no scent is objectively good or bad. Scent is a completely subjective sense. So even to the extent that we all feel a visceral revulsion at the scent of death, you might think that that's just like an inherent biological fact, but actually it is indeed a learned association. That scent somehow touches us on this primal level, makes us think about danger and death and mortality, and that's why we don't like it. Not if you could never associate, if you never had that association, but that association creeps in ways that we don't aren't even aware of. But that was really fascinating to learn.
It really is. No, I hadn't thought about that. I think about animals, and how they react to it. Well, anyway, the other thing I thought about is that in literature, we often run across elixirs, in storytelling. I mean,
Yes.
the love potion of Tristan and Isolde, but magical elixirs that can transform people. And to some degree, I've always thought that there had to be. I mean, the idea of a potion,
Right.
that somehow or other you can change, your life or the world around you or whatever it might be by imbuing an elixir, but maybe you can spray it on, spritz it on.
Right. It's such an appealing fantasy, right? Like this idea that there could be some sort of shortcut to confidence, shortcut to attractiveness, shortcut to desire. Um, but I loved playing with that. I think this book is so much about desire and connecting to it. Fragrance is the one thing I put on that makes me feel more beautiful, that has nothing to do with how I look. It's a totally emotional reaction that makes me feel different about myself. And that goes back to the scent and storytelling. Scent tells us stories about where we've been, our past, our childhood. It evokes those memories, but it also evokes fantasies. It tells you a story about where you might go, who you might become, what you might do. I think a scent can simultaneously feel so identity affirming. You try a new perfume and you go, this is so me. And yet it might be a version of you that you've never been before. And I love that sort of possibility and imagination that it sparks and sense of self-creation. It really dovetailed with sort of the journey of growth and self-determination that the main character's on.
So your first book, The Ghosts of Harvard, which
Yes,
you and I discussed back then when it published, was really an academic. I mean, it was set obviously at Harvard.
right.
And in the end, you came down to this really nice phrase on one of the reviews for your book. I wrote myself a note here so I would quote it accurately, just in case I've forgotten.
So kind of you.
Hang on while I find it. It said that at the end of The Ghosts of Harvard, it ends as a story of personal growth and redemption. And, I think that's true in full bloom as well. So that appears to be, a story arc or, whatever that you like to tell. But yet these books um, are very different. This is not an academic book. Instead, we are trying to navigate the highs and lows of Manhattan and what
Right. Summer
somebody
in the
can.
city.
Well,
Exactly.
yeah, and I mean, and that's kind of your, you live there, that's a territory that you know. And it's been a while since you wrote The Ghosts of Harvard. So are you second novels can be very challenging, for somebody, especially if you've had a successful first novel, because then there are all these expectations. So, did you or are you prone to write something completely different, even if the basic theme and the story arc is going to kind of end the same, but you want to go and explore some new territory? Is that what appeals to you as a writer?
Yeah, I mean, I think these two novels, like you said, they have very different, certainly very different settings, different vibes in some ways, but you were, insightful in that I think there is a similar DNA. They're both a little bit of genre bending, and they both, I'm always interested in kind of a relatable thorny sort of internal psychological question that would be so subtle to explore the way we all live it. But so I just sort of crank it with the volume up a bit with some kind of high concept catalyst that can help us look at it in that crucible, turn the heat up a bit on it. But I'm always, this book deals with fragrance and perfume and has, maybe some hints of magical realism up to the reader to decide how much magic they think is happening in the book. But really, it's not a book about perfume, it's a book about people. It's a book about, a woman. And I think my interest always lies in those real human questions that confound me and I struggle with. I never write about what I have figured out. I write about what I'm still grappling with. And then I just enjoy a more dramatic concept and a way to look at it with that sort of more vivid color.
There, both your books, you have set them in places familiar to you,
Yes, I'm
Cambridge.
very inspired by my own environment.
Right, exactly. Be interesting to see as you continue down the path if you branch out into some place that's not familiar to you.
That's my plan for the next one. I can't talk too much about it because it's so early and fragile and I'm too emotionally fragile with it. But yeah, I think I am going to explore. But for these two, I really loved, you know, New York is something that we've seen New York, but I wanted to show different versions. This book will take the reader to, like you said, the highs of luxury real estate, exclusive restaurants, just dream architectural gems of mansions on Shelter Island in the Hamptons. And it tackles uh, tenant harassment for elderly rent-controlled residents of New York. It deals with the just terrible, egregious mismanagement of New York public housing and its fatal consequences. So that's that tension in New York where you have this extreme income inequality that is all cheek by jowl. It's an ant farm of people of every walk of life living so crammed next to each other, haves and have-nots, suffering and luxury. You walk by a $12 million townhouse and on the street there's somebody who doesn't have a home. And just to exist in that space, I think it creates this disassociation within the residents. Like you can't possibly cope with all of that at the same time as you just trying to get to the subway. But so it's not a moral judgment on that, but the toll that takes on us. And I thought there was this commonality between the main character too, has a little disassociated from her body. She's got her walls up. She's got that compartmentalization. She's dealing with, comparing her life to her friends. She longs to have a family, just as her relationship is ending. She's learning her fertility is low. She might need to do egg freezing while her best friend is, pregnant and happily married. And similarly, in New York, you can live close enough to look in the window of somebody who has everything you want. And how do you exist in that? How do you find satisfaction? How do you find the courage to go after what you want? That's the kind of thing I was interested in and why I felt like it had to be set in New York.
Well, I think for many people, New York, I mean, adrenaline junkies really thrive in New York. And New York is always changing. My husband grew up on Park Avenue.
Oh,
And
wow.
over the course, I grew up in Chicago. He grew up in New York. And over the course of his growing up and so forth, the city keeps changing around you. And
Mhm.
we just sold our last real estate, our last real I can't talk. Our last New York real estate in January, a big co-op at 29th and 6th, and we sold our other co-op at 57th and Park in 2008.
Hmm.
And they were very different. I mean, those
Yes.
two pieces of real estate they could have been in different cities in different parts of the country. They were so completely disparate. And life within them, both of them, New York has, this whole well, you know that because you're writing this whole co-op way of owning real estate, which
Yes.
is particularly challenging. And
I live in a co-op. Yep.
right, so it creates little micro communities,
Hmm.
within. I had a really interesting conversation with Chris Pavone about his book in May, in which he has moved into a building like that, but it's an old New York building and, very much protected as a landmark and all. So, you can live in a little micro community in New York and rarely even get outside it.
Right.
But then all around you, you have this enormous pressure of population and neighborhoods going up and down, and even keeping up with what's the right address in New York today,
Oh,
I think is
you could
even
make
more
yourself
challenging.
crazy with that, right?
Yeah. But anyway, let's go back for a minute because obviously, you are you like research, you're an academic in part by nature. What did you do in order to write about perfume and this kind of elixir of perfume that is going to affect um, life? How did you go about? Because I'm assuming you didn't actually know a lot about it when you started out here.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've been a perfume fanatic my whole life. I think
Oh,
just
so
from
I'm
seeing my
wrong.
mom's glittering bottles on her dresser drawers and feeling like they held all the secrets to, adult femininity. Because of course my mom only sprayed her perfume when she was going out and going out without me. Um, the
Ah,
horror. But I remember she gifted me a little mini bottle of Lancome's Trésor. Remember that bottle? It looked like
yeah.
kind of an upside down pyramid. And I just treasured it. I mean, I was crazy about it. I just felt like I'm so grown up. Of course, I was 5, so grown up probably meant 16, but I was, just transported by it. But so I've always loved it. So some of this I come by honestly, like I am a weirdo who watches fragrance reviews on YouTube. Even though I can't smell the fragrance, I'm just very compelled by reading people's descriptions of fragrance, hearing them talk about it because it's so evocative to the imagination. But you're right, I did have to do a lot of research, and I actually did what has long been a bucket list trip for me. I went to Grasse in the south of France, and which is the cradle of European perfumery. It is a unique environmental kind of temperate basin that is really good for growing all the flowers that go into perfumery, and therefore the industry has been for centuries there. And I got, toward the museums and studied at these perfume libraries and got to meet with toward the oldest distillery in France, Gallimard, the perfume house. It's been in continuous production since I think 1747, and I got to work one-on-one with a professional perfumer in her workshop and sit down at what they call the perfumer's organ, and that's the term for the sort of the perfumer's desk because it has these tiered shelves, tiered of all the little essential oils, and it looks like a musical organ. And interestingly, perfume has so much, we really lack a robust vocabulary for scent, but therefore in all languages they speak about scent in metaphor, and music metaphor is probably the most pervasive, where they talk about the perfumer's organ and the notes of a fragrance, and composing it is the verb. And anyway, it was just really fun, and I got to compose a fragrance from head note to heart note to base notes and just see what that process is like and pour all that experience and research into this book. It was just so fun and so rich. It's truly poetry and artistry and really hard chemistry, which is so fascinating.
Well, I think there's some parallels with the wine industry too. I mean, people
Definitely.
talk about the nose.
Right.
There's a nose for, especially for red wines, the vintner, the winemaker, has to have a wonderful nose for working things. But I think that's true for perfume
Yeah.
as well. And, I mean, there are bios of or films about Coco Chanel and, coming up with
Right.
Chanel number 5 and rival fragrances and the whole bit. And I think, the French, um, when personal sanitation was sort of at a low and people were living in Versailles in these, amazing clothes without really access in it to a great degree with any kind of bathing or whatever it is, they drenched themselves in perfume to try to disguise, you know. Well, they did, I
Yeah.
mean, it's a known thing that that was Madame de Pompadour was, renowned for that kind of thing. And so that was perfume in part as a disguise
Mhm.
for less pleasant smells, but it was also an aphrodisiac. It was also, but
Right.
it's sort of I think the Italians too, but the French have always been associated, I think, with perfume, at least in the Western world. But then,
Yes, it is
think
a
about
national art.
think about India, think about sandalwood, and
No, it's true. I mean, I think America is like the most deodorized, scent
exactly.
frightened culture, probably. Um, but at the same time, I'll tell you also, like I did do some historical research when I was briefly flirting with whether this book should not be set in modern day. Again, ultimately, I decided I want to write a book about people and not a book about perfume. But even in my research, a lot of that historical stuff about that it was masking, especially for women, masking bad smells, is actually just sexist propaganda. I mean, even
Yeah.
back in the day, at that time, there were, you know, religious leaders writing treatises about how men smell good because they are virtuous and good, but women smell dirty and disgusting and bad, and they need fragrance to counteract it, but also trying to counteract it is the stuff of harlotry. Like it was always a lot about controlling women and a lot about vilifying the supposedly disgusting scent of female sex organs as if men weren't equally stinky in this time. And even in the paintings, there's all these, these famous paintings of a woman seated and she's often has a dog on her lap and the dog is sort of like resting on her head. And actually, that was a trope that was ostensibly that the dog was smelling her armpit and the dog was like supposed to represent the animalic disgustingness of her and her sort of treachery in flirting with men. So what I think is so interesting about fragrance is that it sort of started as this way to denigrate women, but then got co-opted by women. We reclaimed it, and we're like, no, actually, we are going to become these great consumers of this and such a powerful market of it as a beauty industry project that then it started to shift later in times as something that was more aphrodisiac and it sort of shifted about what its purpose was. But I question just how yucky all those ladies smelled. They might not have smelled so bad.
Well, I think the men smelled bad too. I didn't think it
Yeah.
was just the women. I think it was general, the perspiration and food and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
They were they never washed their hair. They had flour. I mean, it
Let's
must
be
have been
real.
just
I mean, for
ghastly.
centuries, so much of beauty rituals is really about controlling women and keeping them, you know, playing against these beauty standards we cannot win. And at least in modern day, I loved the way fragrance kind of escapes that because it isn't a visual. We certainly do have these impossible beauty standards that we want women to meet. Impossible not only in that they're hard for normal humans to achieve, but also impossible in the sense that, yes, we want you to be beautiful and you might turn your head when a beautiful woman passes, but if her dress is too short or it's too tight or there's the right kind of beautiful and the wrong kind of beautiful, that's what I mean, where it's like this game with the ever-changing moving goalposts. You can be undermined for being attractive just as much as you can be celebrated. It's very shifting sands. But because fragrance isn't visual, because it works on the smellers on a subliminal level, I think it resists some of that policing and arbitrary gamesmanship. And also, what I love is that it works on the wearer just as much. That if anything, the wearer smells it the most and how it changes that sense of self and that view. And I think, I think about how much of beauty it's about fixing flaws and I'm so sort of separate from my body. It's like I'm trapped inside this disobedient body that's too big and wrongly shaped and not lifted whatever, right? I'm looking in the mirror doing a Terminator scan of my flaws. I'm sort of separate in that moment from myself. I'm not even looking at myself. I'm suddenly the critical other. But fragrance, in contrast, yes, sure, it makes us more desirable objects. I'm not saying we all want to be wanted, but it also reminds us that we're an agent of our desire. I think it kind of reintegrates us into our bodies, into a sensual experience of our bodies, and just takes some steps to heal that weird triangulation that women are so socialized to do.
I think we should talk about the story before we.
Sure, sure.
Nonetheless, I think I find this a totally fascinating discussion. So let's talk about Iris. First place, it's cool that she's called Iris,
Yes,
because I mean she could have been called Rose, I guess, or Peony or something.
right.
And in fact, that's another whole deal about naming people for flowers and scents. There's a whole language of flowers the Victorians understood, blah blah. But anyway, we have Iris, whose life when we meet her is not what she would like it to be. So tell us the story
Right.
of Iris.
In full bloom, Iris Sunnegren is the main character. She's 35, and instead of feeling like she's sort of rising to some fully realized place in her adult life, she is feeling stuck and stalled and disconnected. Like I said, the relationship, her long-term relationship, live-in boyfriend that she thought was going to be her happily ever after, ends in a surprise breakup instead of a proposal. The job at her lighting design firm, where she has been grinding for 10 years and paying her dues and proving her worth, they keep passing her over for this promotion, and her male colleagues either dismiss her ideas if they don't outright steal them. And just all she wants in her life is to have a family. She lost her parents in a childhood house fire. She has felt alone for so much of her life. She's had this dream, and it's just feeling farther out of reach when she gets the news that she may be having trouble with her fertility and need to freeze her eggs if that's even going to be a possibility. And it's like, how did I get here? How can I be in this place? Until she receives a gift from her mysterious French neighbor who is a professional perfumer and gifts her this bespoke perfume, meaning this fragrance is calibrated only for Iris. It's one of a kind, made just for her. And her neighbor promises it's going to change her life. Iris is skeptical, but it does seem that with one spritz, she's attracting attention wherever she goes. Men are hitting on her at work, they're listening to her, doors are opening. And it's there's a little bit of wish fulfillment, but it also initially is just exacerbating her imposter syndrome. It's stirring up uh, you know, impulsive actions. She's acting out of character. Yes, she can achieve her desires and ambitions and these things, but also she doesn't even recognize herself. And it's stirring up a lot of memories that she has long wanted to keep buried. So that's the question, how does this fragrance shake up her life? How can she feel worthy of all the perfume is affording her and sort of step into that power? That's what is the premise of Full Bloom.
Right. Well, it is a journey that
Yes.
absolutely that she goes on. Um, and at some point, and she's acquired this, I don't think crutch is the right word. That seems really pedestrian. She's acquired this kind of other um, asset, whatever you want to call
Right.
it.
Yeah.
And is she going to be dependent on it forever? I mean, I think,
Yeah.
it's kind of like Aladdin, I mean, at some point, if you run out of your 40 wishes, what
Right. I mean,
happens?
exactly. It is and it isn't. I think in the sense that if being attractive is all that women needed to get what they want and achieve power, we would have a much better looking president. I mean, we would have a lot more women in power if that were the case. Um, in reality, like I said, sometimes when somebody takes a liking to you at work, it isn't, sort of the leg up gift that others might make it out to be. It can be a death knell for your career. It can be, oh my, it brings a lot of complications. And I think I was interested in exploring those sexual politics and that power dynamics where, like I said, being attractive can open doors and it can be the thing that people dismiss and undermine you for. So it's not a magic bullet. It's not like an unmitigated magic wand or some super powerful thing that she just has to learn how to wield responsibly. And really the question is an internal one. It's this perfume allows her to go after what she wants. And that can be really scary because when you are really it can feel safe and self-protected to try to guard against disappointment by not asking for too much and maybe modulating the ask and trying to be reasonable, just keep your ambitions small. But to really unleash it, to really go for it, is to open yourself up to getting hurt, to open yourself up to that disappointment, to failure. And it's like, does she even have the courage to lean into what the perfume is offering?
Well, yes, all of that is true. And additionally, I think the question is, who would I be without it once you become
Yeah,
whoever you are with it?
right.
Would be also a very frightening thought. I mean, I'm thinking about stories where people have been granted, like access or magical powers or something, and then there's kind of that day where the piper needs to be paid, and can you go on without it, or are you only there because you had it and you're not worthy of it? Or,
Right.
I
She's
mean,
tortured by that. She's
yeah,
tortured by that.
it's a real fairy tale thing. I don't know if you've run into it, but there's a most amazing new book out, and it's called The Women of the Fairy Tale Resistance.
No,
It's
I
got-
haven't.
Listen, it is amazing. And basically, what it is a woman has gone back and looked at, Charles Perrault and the Brothers Grimm are kind of but what her argument is that we're back in France, back in the 17th century, when the monarchy was so controlling, when Louis XIV didn't want anyone, to
Right.
um, in any way tarnish, the Sun King, that women had no power at all. They were just, all the things we've been talking about. And so some of them started salons where they could get together in groups of women, sort of like today book clubs or
Yes,
something,
yes.
and talk. But the thing is that they couldn't be subversive directly by naming things. And
Hmm.
so what they did was they created fairy tales.
Oh,
And
how
because
interesting.
if it were fictional, I mean, this is all documented. I
Right.
find it fascinating. So many of the fairy tales that we think that these men came along and basically usurped them and took credit for them. Like we think that, Charles
Yeah.
Perrault was the guy, but it wasn't. What he did was he basically took the work of these women and took credit for it. So the book is about going back to, I think it's seven or maybe nine of these women who created salon and created fairy tales to kind of deal with, patriarchy, power structure, invisibility, all those things. And I find that I love the title, but I also find, that is really fascinating. Why is it that the stories that we treasure are all coming to us from men?
Right. I mean, I did think of this book in some ways as sort of an urban fairy tale or even a modern Gothic story. It's so funny you mentioned fairy tales. I took a seminar in college that was one of my favorite classes ever that was all about folklore and fairy tales taught by Maria Tatar, who's an incredible author. She's written some like nonfiction books for, you know, um, mainstream readers too, and about that scholarship. And yeah, I think I did have those elements in this book, and at the same time, to me, it is not a cautionary tale. I don't think that this book is a be careful what you wish for plot.
No, no, I don't
Yeah,
either.
yeah. It's because it's like I was interested, but I was interested in engaging with that, in playing with it, in sort of setting it up like it might be, and then showing that, sometimes what we think we want doesn't yield what we need, what we do, all that complication. I have this one line in here that to me is like the most radical for me question I still struggle with in my own life. When the perfumer Madame Rapazine gives her the fragrance, gives Iris the fragrance, she says, I made this perfume because I want you to feel your power and to show the world what you're capable of. But above all, I want you to get what you want. And Iris says, I'd settle for just getting what I deserve. And Rapacine's reply is, who's to say they are not one and the same? You deserve everything you want. And I say it's radical because I still, even when I read it now, struggle with like, do I agree with Rapacine? Do you just deserve everything you want? And I don't think that it's presented in the book as that's completely true. Iris has a hard time connecting with that. But to me, that question of as an individual, as a woman, can we give ourselves permission to be worthy first? Can we say that we deserve it first, deserve to go after it? Because if we don't throw off that limitation, we'll never get it. Like the universe will not recognize your humility for not going after something or not trying. But at the same time, the universe doesn't reward you just for trying. So like you might as well get out of your own way. What on some level, what difference does it make? You have to say yes to yourself first. And I think that's something I still struggle with self-doubt and deservingness and worthiness. I get very tangled up with that. And I think Iris is a person who's very tangled up with that. And she's at first thinks that the fragrance is about giving her external validation, but ultimately finds it's something different.
Let's talk about Madame Rapazine for a moment because she's in this
Yes.
book as kind of a fairy godmother.
Yes.
Um, you
A
know.
witch, a good witch.
She is. No, she absolutely is. How did you see her story playing out against Iris's story? I don't want to do any spoilers here, but
Yeah, no, she's probably one of the mo my most favorite characters I've ever written. She is older, but not elderly. She's probably in my mind in her 70s or 80s, but she defies every expectation of a woman her age. She is beautiful, she's sexual, she's charismatic, she's French. I and my interpretation of the French in this, or her at least, is that she's simultaneously romantic but very unsentimental. I think in some ways she's a mother figure for Iris. Iris is, of course, missing her mother after her mother passed as a child. I don't think Rapazine is a perfect mother figure in that she's not necessarily the most warm and nurturing, but she also does really want for Iris and one Iris to one for herself and has is full of advice, not all of which I'm co-signing, but yeah, it was a really fun character and even her name I sort of pulled for you talk about like these old origin stories from a Nathaniel Hawthorne short story called Rappaccini's Daughter. And that story is about it's this little gothic short story that is about a, mysterious Italian doctor who creates poisons and medicines, poisons and antidotes, and throughout with experiments in his beautiful walled secret garden. And the only person who can tend the poisonous plants in his garden without getting harmed is his daughter, who's been raised on the poisons. And in fact, even though she's incredibly beautiful, she is poisonous herself. Even her breath is noxious because of this work. So he made her this way so that she can never be plucked, right? And to a certain extent, that story is very of its time. It's very sexist. It's very dated. But and Rapacine is not a direct, descendant from it, but she's sort of a modern twist on a Gothic heroine in the sense that, and the commonality she shares is believing that beauty needs fangs, that we need a little noxiousness. She is not Pollyanna-ish about what the world is like to women. She does not just think we all need to lean in. She kind of thinks we need to fight back. And I was very interested in exploring, her past and how that informs her advice to Iris, and whether it's all good or bad. But it was a really fun and really interesting character.
she is an interesting character. I love the Poison Garden idea,
Yeah,
but she has her own battle.
she
Which
does.
is a New York real estate battle.
Yes, she's the one who they're trying to oust from this brownstone. She's a rent-controlled
Right.
apartment, and she does not want to leave it, but it has new ownership, and they are just the new landlords are just trying to make her so miserable to leave, but they picked the wrong one, Barbara.
Well, they did. Actually, it's interesting because your mom's new book, the that we talked to her about in July is the
Yeah,
same thing. I mean, it's an effort to oust somebody from real estate. I mean,
right,
developers are, I think they've kind of replaced, other villains because
right,
we're dealing with them here in Scottsdale and,
everywhere.
they're just
Mhm.
rapacious. Yeah.
The
Um,
housing crisis is like an America-wide problem, and
yes.
you're absolutely right. And they are the apex predators of New York. And I once like was chatting with a local politician, glad handing at the farmers market, and talking about housing policy, and he said, "Real estate to New York is what oil is to Texas.
Mhm.
There's just too much money in it for not to be corrupt and be plagued by all different kinds of, competing interests." And um, I think I live that. I see it all the time, and at the same time, there are things that go on that that you can't believe people get away with. Um, but yeah, it was just really fertile ground and for high stakes drama for sure.
It was. No, I like the way Rapacine deals with her own story thing. In fact, she's such a good character. It'd be interesting to see if she pops up in another book.
It's true. I mean, I gave a little hint at her backstory that
Yeah.
I don't want to give away, but I really enjoyed thinking about that and thinking about how this woman who seems so impervious, sort of so untouchable to a point of, even though she has this wonderful affinity of with reading people and connecting at the same time is quite isolated, when you see her backstory, you kind of see why her own self-protection has made her that way too. And yeah, I could really love, she's from Grasse, and I would love to see like, this 1970s set story maybe of her time in that in
Yeah, but
France.
some characters are so good that while, Iris's story is done. I mean, you've told Iris's story. Well, maybe, but
I think she undergoes a lot of, this book has big
right.
twists and she certainly undergoes big revelations, but I do think I really wanted to explore with this novel, what does the coming of age story look like when you're already grown?
No,
And
that's an excellent way to look at it. Um,
yeah, so I think she has her marching orders, but she still has a lot of growing to do after the last page.
well, that's undoubtedly true, and you certainly could explore that. But I think that Rapazine has potential in other stories.
Yes,
Um,
she's a
She's
mystery
just
wrapped in an
way too good
enigma.
a
So
character to say, okay, we're done.
right.
It's interesting. Sometimes I think that novelists, especially in series,
Mhm.
fall in love with a character and unwisely keep them around too long. I mean, I have seen it over and over again where the author finds this character far more compelling than the reader.
That's so
They can,
interesting. Well,
yeah,
I'll try to listen to
I could give
readers.
you
I
a
know
list.
readers liked the character Elijah. They wanted to know more of that from Ghosts of Harvard, and from this one. If readers are telling me Rapacine, maybe I'll listen. But yeah, I won't. I won't
Well,
just
it depends on what story you want to tell next. I mean, I'm not saying that she would inevitably have a role in it, but
right.
I do think there are characters that, and particularly in a kind of agency role, which is what she has, that there's
Yeah.
potential for her having more agency in other,
Yeah.
if the stories that you like to explore are um, again, where lives are maturing or whatever and coming to a place of power and redemption and whatever it is, then an agent like her is kind of got a natural role.
You're
So,
right. And for any readers who ever read the essay books that I wrote with my mom, Lisa Scottolini,
right.
they might recognize traces of Mother Mary in Madame Rapacine, even though really that's my grandmother, even though they're so different, but at the same time, I grew up with an incredible example of a tiny force of nature in my grandmother. She was barely 5 feet tall and just larger than life, and her voice still rings in my ears, and I thought of her often. I've just thought of trying to make her smile when I wrote that character.
Yes, no, I can certainly see this. I know she had a big role in your mom's life, and I'm not at
She was
all.
basically my babysitter when my mom was working, so like she
Yeah.
helped raise me. So we were
No.
very close.
Well, I think is there anything else you'd like to say before we call Patrick up?
No, I'm just so grateful to be here. Thank you for having me. And I just hope that everybody who reads this, like, that they close the book and feel more empowered, more self-compassionate, and more brave.
And not only that, but actually are willing to explore the possibilities of scent in their own lives.
Yeah, have fun with it. You don't have to. It's not scratch and sniff. So if you are allergic to
No,
scent, you can still
no,
enjoy the book. But if you've never tried it before, yeah, see where it takes you in your mind. It's fun.
it is fun. And I will also point out that there's an entire male fragrance industry that has been
Oh, I've heard
gaining.
of those.
Oh,
Yeah, like
yeah. I
Scentbird
mean,
and
if
stuff.
just flip through the New York Times Magazine or the Wall Street Journal, whatever, where they do their sort of loose living thing, there are always advertisements, for fragrances designed to do for men what they are designed to do for women. I find that, and sometimes writers, when describing a male character, attribute some sort of scent or aftershave or perfume or something recognizable. I mean,
Yeah.
supposing, you're in the dark and it's a foggy place and whatever, and somebody comes along, might be frightening, might be good or something, but what if their scent allows you to recognize them, even
Yes.
when you can't see them?
Mhm.
It's like a
I was so
calling card.
interested in that, like all the ways that our bodies communicate to one another. And that have nothing, no, non-verbally, like we really do, because I just feel that in modern life, we have delegated so much to algorithms. I'm, swiping for the love of my life, trying to connect or not connect to playing card digital pictures of men, no, hating the thought that I'm boiled down to a playing card digital version of myself. Whereas when I'm in person, I can tell right away if I like somebody. And it's just like, when did we stop trusting our noses? What are we missing when we're missing the smell test? That's what this book is
Good
trying to
point.
explore.
For years, my Stanford Alumni magazine has carried an advertisement from a woman who is running like dating a match bureau.
Yeah.
It's always her deal is scent. Her deal is that she can create a pheromone for you. Yeah, I'm serious.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, I have read that for years, and I've never, I've not needed to avail myself of her services, so I've never tried it out.
Right, right.
But basically, it's scent marketing is more or less what she's encouraging people
Hey,
to do, and I find that, I mean, it's been there for probably 10 years.
it can't be worse than Hinge.
I wouldn't know. I mean, fortunately, I've been spared all that, but nonetheless,
Fair,
there
fair.
we
It's
go.
not so
All
bad. I'm
right.
on it. I'm still on it.
Patrick, come and join us and see. You probably are finding much of this extremely amusing. Wherever he is, there he is. Right.
There we go.
And, yes, very amusing. Uh, and the people that are online are trading their favorite perfumes and scents and stuff
Ooh,
Wonderful.
like that. It's pretty cool. Um, Linda would like to know what are her favorite perfumes that she considers her signature scent?
mine.
Yeah, I guess yours. Yeah.
I have too big a fragrance collection now to have a signature scent, even though I love that concept and I did at other times in my life. But now I have this big collection and I wear it. I choose a fragrance like a daily outfit, based on the weather, the occasion, the season, the mood. So I can't choose just one, but some favorites are Hermes Rose y Cabana. It's like this
Ooh,
peppery watercolor rose. It's so easy to wear, and I love it. Um, for this book, the fragrance in this book is not inspired one to one on any single fragrance, but some that I pulled for and got me in the right headspace. One was Frederic Mall's Carnal Flower, which is sort of an icy tuberose. And for a long time, the working title of this book was Carnal Flower, just because it was like got me in the right space. But that fragrance is it's ultra femme. It makes me feel super powerful. It feels like a cool silk chemise just fluttering down your skin, but it's also a little untouchable. And this book, I really wanted that sultry summer, inviting note. And I found this fragrance so interesting that you said you talked about Corsica at the beginning of our conversation. A Corsican perfumer named Marc-Antoine Corticchiato. He has a line, a niche line. I mean, it's just like a small fragrance line. They don't make fashion, they don't make any beauty products, just perfume. And it's called Parfum d'Empire, like
ooh,
perfume of empire.
fire.
And he has one called Un bel amour d'été, a beautiful summer love. And this
Ooh,
fragrance is like, it's a knockout. It is not for everybody. It's not a safe blind buy, maybe, but I think it's gorgeous. It's primarily a gardenia, and the trail is just these lovely white and yellow flowers. But when you smell it really close under your skin, there is this naughty little cumin note, this little spice note that in any lesser perfumer hands could have been too sweaty or too gross, but he is a genius. It's perfectly calibrated, and it just gives like this authentic kind of humanity skin. It smells like the sun-warmed shoulder of your lover. It is just sexy and romantic and heated. And I smelled that one a lot when I was writing this book.
you should actually go into marketing for perfume.
I have been steeped in
You're
fragrance language, so
natural
yeah,
with
I'm
this. I
ready.
know. I love it. I
All
love
right,
it.
so I'm gonna turn the tables on you. What are
Okay.
the best colognes and things for dudes that you like?
Oh my gosh, I love cologne on men, and I think it's so sad that like a few guys who went a little too crazy with the spraying has like scared all men off of being that guy with too much cologne.
Right.
Listen, just spritz it and then walk through it, max maybe 3, 4 times, like it'll be fine. But I don't know. I love to the extent that fragrance can evince somebody's personality. So I would just want a man to choose what he likes, what makes him feel like himself. And maybe that, yeah, that gets far, far away from the Axe body spray of the early aughts. And, not just a speed
Yeah.
stick sport smell, but something a little more adventurous. But it's an individual thing.
We have one of our John Nato, our employee, kind of volunteer. He thinks that his significant other will not know that he sneaks a cigarette now and then
You're right.
by dousing himself
Yeah, I
in,
always
in
can be good,
cologne.
right?
And it's just so obvious, it's
Right.
hilarious.
That's using
Hopefully,
perfume as masking, which is an entirely different thing.
yes.
Right.
And
Hopefully she's not watching tonight.
It
But
never
not
works that well as a
enhancing,
mask.
right?
Yeah.
okay, Stefania, our friend from Italy,
Oh, ciao.
she just tuned in. She says, I don't know if the author has already talked about it, but I would like to know something more about her Italian origins. Does she speak Italian? Has she ever felt discriminated because of her Italian side? And what does she love the most about my country?
Ah, grazie per la domanda. Parlo italiano, but I learned Italian in college because I was born in Philadelphia. I'm like third or fourth generation Italian. So, um, my parents were the generation where their parents wanted them to be very good Americans. So they didn't speak Italian at home and tried to sort of hammer that out. And then my parents tried to reclaim the old country with my name, Francesca Serritella, but they were helpless to teach me Italian. And I studied French all through high school and thought I wanted to be a French lit major in college. But then I just realized it was so disappointing to be Francesca Serritella and I speak French. So I had to learn Italian. I fell in love with the language. I've always been in love with the country and culture. I love Italian opera. It's certainly a part of my cultural heritage that's so important to me. I don't think I've really dealt with any real serious discrimination because of it. People make their jokes. Italian is one of the ethnicities you're allowed to dunk on. So I've heard all the mob jokes. I've heard all that. But, it's a small price to pay because everybody wants to be Italian. We know. Just kidding, just kidding. But she gets it.
Yeah, for sure. Um, let's see. She's actually complimenting you on your accent.
Oh, thanks. I'm really rusty. I was fluent, but I never get to practice. So I'm overdue for a trip to Italy.
What
Aha.
about your mom? Does she speak much Italian?
Not a bit. Yeah, she's now that she's writing more about Italy, I'm like, you have to learn it. And I try to get her to do Duolingo, or I promise I would help her learn elementary Italian. I think she will someday. I mean, we both really love it. My relatives are from, um, on her side, Abruzzo and Marche, and my dad is from a small town called Riccigliano. It's sort of like in Salerno, inward from the Amalfi Coast. When I've never been, and I've never been to Italy with my dad. So my cousin and I might go on like a Riccigliano quest together because it's his 50th and going to be my 40th in a year. So maybe we'll do that and try to, explore because my last name, there are very few Americans with the last name Serritella, but this town is in, I think Salerno is like all Serritellas. So I have to go
Oh,
find them.
It's great. Yeah, Robin would like to know. She's interested in the bookshelves and behind you. Are there any special
Yes.
treasures in there that
So
you'd
I
like to?
can't take too much credit. This is my childhood home. This is my mom's house. I'm just coming to you just after finishing my book tour in Pennsylvania. So I'm still in Pennsylvania. I do have obviously fabulous full overstuffed bookshelves in New York. Just I don't have this much room. These are all signed books, if you can believe it, because something my mom has taught me is that writing a novel is lonely, but the author community is so powerful. And so we love our friends. We always get signed books from our favorite authors. And yeah, this is all, it's just we have a whole other room of shelves like this.
Yeah, your mom orders a lot of them from us.
mhm.
Absolutely. Of
She
course, the Boys
does.
and Pen, I mean, please, you guys are an institution.
Let's see. You know what? I think that's really it as far as there was one question earlier about are there any particular perfumes or scents that make you sneeze right away?
Yes, my mom used to one the one she would wear going out was Hermes Faubourg, the one that looks like a scarf, and that used to make me sneeze a bit. And sometimes anything that has a lot of aldehydes, which are sort of the notes and that characterize Chanel number 5, can be they smell a little artificial. I do like fragrances that smell really naturalistic, but again, it's different perfumers' hands. Aldehydes can be wonderful.
I wish that I had remembered to dig out from, because I've kept it all these years, 70 some years. Um, I have a bottle of Colognewasser, the original cologne, which is made in Köln, Germany. And it's a beautiful bottle and it has a spherical shape and then it has a metal thing on it with a picture of
Mhm.
the dome, the Cologne Cathedral. And it's called Köln 1847 because that was the year that this is not perfume. This is
Yes,
cologne, which
yes,
is,
cologne, right.
different. And I'm sure that the inside is evaporated by now. I've always kept it, for the bottle. But it is interesting how iconic some some scents, whether cologne or perfume, the bottle shape, the not
Oh, and the
just the
bottles were such a
smell,
big part of it, and they were like the rise of perfume as
right?
a product and the rise of crystal makers like Baccarat and
Yeah,
Lalique. And that's why I loved that one of the love interests in this book is a glass blower. And that was in part because I loved the sort of commonality of this like elemental practice of fire and breath and glass, and then you have fragrance and sort of like scent and whatever. I liked that he was a good foil for Iris, but I also just was very inspired that when I was researching in Grasse, of learning how essential the crystal makers were and thinking about
yeah.
these two art forms.
Well, yeah, I think part of the magic is the beautiful bottles, the crystalline, that allows because it's not part of it is the color. I mean, perfume
Everything,
can
right.
range from
It's the
amber
fantasy.
to, yeah. No, it's
It does
wonderful.
it tries to give everybody that experience of that the magical elixir.
I was trying to find the reason I'm looking down, which is sort of rude,
No.
is that we just recently watched a TV, a detective show set in France. I mean
Oh,
in Grasse, sorry.
oh
And
neat.
it was really, and it's a perfume dynasty, like
Yeah.
like a wine dynasty, and like most of these French dramas, inheritance is like the driver of the crime,
Oh, I
I
have to
mean,
find this show.
I
That
know it,
is so
and
common. I
I'm
mean, I made Rapazine, a fourth generation nose, and there was some female professional perfumer in real life who, in an interview, she was from Grasse, and she said, if you are born in Grasse, you have two choices. You can become a perfumer or you can steal mopeds. That's what she said.
That's
Your two career
a
paths
really
were
good point.
perfume or stealing mopeds. And I thought that was pretty great.
Well, I'm gonna try to look it up. We watched it, and I mean, there used to be a wonderful series with a French actor whose name I can't recall, but he was a wine specialist, and so he was the wine detective. And the series, which went on for several seasons, took you to one glorious, French wine estate after another. And and as I said, much of the drama involved around inheritance or,
Yeah.
who was going to be top dog or whatever it all was. But this one that I'm thinking of, which we stumbled upon, set in Grasse, was exactly the same thing, except it was a perfume dynasty, and what they grew were roses. And,
Mm.
so there was like some foul person, like sprayed pesticide on the
Oh
roses and
no.
killed
Oh,
it.
like
I
a
know.
battle.
But I mean, it was
Yeah.
very much the same dynamic. And maybe because the French really are an agricultural group at heart, despite
Yeah,
their
it's
urban
certainly a
culture and
weird
all the rest
nexus.
of it. When you
Hmm.
think about France, you think about food, you think about like, goat cheese and all, you think about perfume, which is flowers, you think about wine, the whole bit at their roots, they really are an agricultural country. They're a huge country with
Yeah.
varied climates and all. So anyway, I'll try to find it and I will
Yeah,
email
it's
it to
really
you.
fun. I saw some, I think it was, I watched a seminar with Frederick Mahl, who's a works, has his own line in the industry. And he said that the rose is to perfumers like the human body to an artist, like sort of a figural drawing that you can be endlessly fascinated with. I thought that was so true and cool.
It is. Well, we've kept you long enough. Thank you all for watching it. Stefani, if you're still watching, you need to answer my question about whether you want to have dinner while we're in Florence. I just emailed you. I know, isn't it great? I just love all this. But anyway, it's been a real pleasure. Our love to your mom and
Thank
our
you.
signed copies. And we
Oh,
don't
and
have
I also I forgot to say, you know what I learned today? This book is on a national bestseller on the USA Today bestseller list today.
wonderful.
Yes, I'm so happy. And
Congratulations.
actually, I share a spot. I'm right next to my mom on the list with Unraveling of Julia. So it was a very happy day in our family to have a little mother-daughter USA Today bestseller moment. I'm so grateful to my readers. And thank you to any new readers who are meeting me here. Thank you for, I hope you'll give me a chance.
I hope so too. And you can do
Thanks.
that by buying one of our copies, which
Yep.
is shortly before
Yes.
the ride. So good night, everybody. Thank you so much for watching.